Have you ever noticed that some women seem to expect something from you, but never say a word? There's a calculated silence, a subtle psychological game that takes place from the very first encounters, but most men simply don't notice. It's as if they have a radar that detects exactly where to touch, when to pull, and how to gauge a reaction. And most dangerous part, you don't even realize you're being tested, evaluated, analyzed until it's too late. This mechanism begins in the small details. A smile that lasts a second longer, a compliment that is measured, a touch that disappears at the right moment. She's not being malicious. She's unconsciously ensuring that you deserve what she offers emotionally. Many men interpret these signs as direct interest, but in reality, they are entering an invisible labyrinth where every decision you make is observed, tested, and recorded. The crucial point that most ignore is that this test is not necessarily negative. Women do this to understand if you have emotional stability, if you can handle challenges, and if you possess enough social intelligence to meet unspoken expectations. The problem is that good, honest, attentive, and trustworthy men often interpret these subtleties as rejection, confusing love with manipulation. She expects you to discover these silent rules of the game on your own. There's no manual, no explicit hints, just clues hidden in her words and gestures. And the great irony? The more you try to please her, the less you realize you're being subtly evaluated, and every failure, even the slightest, is registered as a warning. Now, here's a powerful truth. Most men give up too soon. They don't realize that the test isn't against them, but in favor of creating a real and lasting connection. Those who understand this learn to play consciously without losing dignity or being manipulated. If you've ever felt like you're being tested without understanding why, stay with me until the end of this video. In the next chapter, I'll reveal the subtlest signs that indicate she's genuinely interested but still testing you. Discovering this can completely change how you relate to others. In the previous chapter, we talked about calculated silence and the subtle tests some women apply without saying a word. Now, it's time to understand the invisible signs, those that go unnoticed by most men, but reveal everything about their intentions and feelings. One of the most common signs is the alternation between closeness and emotional distance. She may be completely involved in a conversation, laugh at your jokes, praise your qualities, and suddenly become cold or distant for no apparent reason. For an unprepared man, this seems confusing or frustrating, but in reality, it's a test to observe your reaction. She wants to know if you can maintain emotional balance without begging for attention or reacting impulsively. Another sign that few men notice is the observation of consistency. She will pay attention to details, whether you keep promises, whether you are punctual, whether you respect boundaries, whether you keep your word. Every action of yours is recorded, even if she never comments on anything. This silent analysis serves to identify whether you have integrity, something that cannot be faked. Furthermore, patience tests are incredibly common. It could be something as simple as delays, changes of plans, or small provocations during conversations. She is assessing how you handle setbacks and unexpected challenges. A man who reacts with anger, jealousy, or insecurity is showing that he does not possess the emotional maturity necessary to continue the relationship. The most critical point here is that these signs are not negative. They are selection tools. Women apply these tests because, deep down, they are seeking confidence, stability, and emotional security. They will not simply verbalize these needs, because part of the challenge is seeing if you can interpret and act correctly without relying on explicit instructions. Learning to identify these signs completely changes how you relate. Instead of reacting instinctively, you begin to analyze, interpret, and respond strategically, maintaining your value and avoiding falling into emotional traps. The key is not to get frustrated or desperate. The more you understand these signs, the more prepared you are to handle the tests intelligently. keeping your emotional balance intact and demonstrating maturity. We explored the invisible signals she sends and how they function as silent tests. Now, let's delve into something even more subtle: the small conflicts or provocations that arise out of nowhere, often for no apparent reason. These conflicts aren't about what's being said, but about who you are in tense situations. It could be a mild criticism, an ironic comment, or even a questioning of your decisions. For most men, these moments seem unfair or irritating, but in reality, they're psychological experiments. She wants to assess how you handle challenge and pressure, whether you remain calm, or whether you lose your composure. An essential point is that these tests are not done consciously most of the time. Many women apply small traps without realizing it because they have been socially conditioned to believe that emotionally strong and stable men are the most desirable. She is unconsciously observing signs of emotional strength, resilience, and the ability to maintain balance in unexpected situations. Another pattern is the test of reaction to mood swings. If she's excited, then cold, or suddenly disinterested, she's analyzing how you react to emotional instability. Men who despair, beg for attention, or try to correct her behavior lose points. On the other hand, those who remain firm, understanding that her behavior is a test and not a personal failing of their own, gain trust and respect. In addition, she often measures the consistency of your behavior. She observes whether you are predictable in your values and attitudes, whether you maintain your boundaries, and whether you don't allow yourself to be emotionally manipulated. These small conflicts act as a filter. They reveal whether you are someone who can offer emotional security and not just momentary passion. The great lesson of this chapter is to understand that not everything that seems like confrontation is really a problem. Often, it is a form of silent communication, a code that tests your maturity and your ability to interpret subtle behaviors. Men who can read these signals without reacting impulsively, maintaining emotional control and self-confidence, are perceived as valuable and trustworthy. Mastering this dynamic is a crucial step for any man who wants to deeply understand the female psychological game, avoiding frustrations and strengthening his position in the relationship. There is something extremely powerful in a woman's silence, something that many men ignore or misinterpret. She doesn't need to shout, complain, or expose her expectations for you to perceive her emotional state. Silence is a subtle but efficient tool used to measure your attention, patience, and emotional intelligence. When she walks away without explaining or responds with few words, she is sending a clear message. She wants to see how you react without direct guidance. This type of test assesses whether you are someone who acts impulsively, seeking approval, or trying to fix the situation without really understanding what is happening. Men who remain centered, attentive, and reflective demonstrate that they have control over their emotions and do not depend on constant validation. Another important point is that silence functions as an indicator of priorities. It shows how much she values your actions compared to your words. If you become desperate, send excessive messages, or demonstrate insecurity, she immediately perceives that you are more focused on gaining her attention than on maintaining your own emotional stability. On the other hand, men who use silence strategically, respecting her space while still demonstrating balanced interest, gain points on a much deeper level. Silence also reveals the ability to read emotions. Men who can identify nonverbal cues, understand subtle mood changes, or perceive when she needs space naturally stand out. This skill doesn't depend on words. It's about attention, observation, and social intelligence. Women tend to respect and connect emotionally with men who perceive nuances without being directly informed, because it demonstrates sensitivity and maturity. In addition, it's common for women to use silence as a trust test mechanism. They want to ensure that you won't succumb to manipulation or become emotionally dependent. The correct reaction is not to pressure or demand explanations, but to maintain stability show value, and act consistently with your principles. Men who understand this dynamic create an aura of confidence that attracts more than any desperate effort or display of need. Understanding the power of silence completely transforms the perception of relationships. It makes it clear that the psychological game is not about domination or manipulation, but about recognizing value, emotional consistency, and relational intelligence. Men who learn to interpret and respond to silence correctly avoid frustration, strengthen bonds, and position themselves as desirable and trustworthy partners. Even when everything seems calm, a woman is constantly applying subtle little tests to assess whether you are truly attentive, interested, and emotionally stable. They don't come in the form of direct questions. Often they're gestures, glances, mood swings, or seemingly banal attitudes that reveal much more than words could. For example, she may take a while to respond to messages, not out of disinterest, but to observe whether you can handle the weight without anxiety. Men who become desperate, send multiple messages, or show frustration instantly fall for these tests. On the other hand, those who maintain patience, demonstrate balance, and take the time for other valuable activities are showing that they possess emotional control and independence, highly valued characteristics. Another common test is observing your reaction to small provocations or challenges. She may make a critical comment, question your opinion, or joke sarcastically, just to gauge how you handle the situation. Men who respond with maturity, good humor, or emotional intelligence show that they are not easily manipulated and know how to stand up for themselves. This is not about imposing authority, but about establishing mutual respect and trust. She may also use social tests. For example, when interacting with friends, colleagues, or even strangers, she notices how you behave in different environments, whether you maintain consistency of character, and whether you demonstrate respect, security, and attention without needing to be instructed. Men who pass these silent tests naturally stand out because they not only react to the moment, but project security and stability, qualities that any woman unconsciously seeks. The crucial point is to understand that these tests do not mean distrust or disinterest. In fact, they are mechanisms for evaluating emotional compatibility. She wants to know if you are someone who will act with consistency, maturity, and self-worth in unexpected situations. It is a natural filter that separates men who only show superficial interest from those who can truly sustain a healthy relationship. Men who perceive and interpret these signals correctly gain an advantage because they do not fall into emotional traps and know how to build trust without rushing. At the same time, they learn to respect her space and understand that every action or reaction has a psychological purpose. This perception avoids unnecessary frustrations, increases the power of attraction, and strengthens the emotional connection between them. Finally, understanding the little tests is essential to avoid reacting impulsively and losing your value. They are part of the silent game that every woman unconsciously applies, and the ability to interpret these signals correctly defines who will be perceived as a reliable and desirable partner. Men who internalize this logic naturally position themselves as leaders in their own relationship, creating a healthy balance between attention, appreciation, and independence. One of the most disconcerting behaviors a man can notice is when she alternates between moments of intense closeness and sudden distancing. This dynamic is neither random nor malicious. In fact, it is a reflection of a deeply rooted psychological mechanism aimed at testing his emotional stability and his ability to deal with ambiguity. When she approaches intensely frequent messages, long calls, constant attention, she is often evaluating his reaction to emotional intensity. Some men interpret this as genuine passion, but the reality is that she wants to observe if you can maintain your balance, if you don't get carried away by excessive emotion or the immediate need for reciprocity. This is a silent way of measuring maturity, patience, and independence. Distancing, on the other hand, serves as a complementary test. When she distances herself, whether by decreasing the frequency of contact or creating small obstacles, she is observing how you react to her absence. Men who panic, show excessive jealousy, or desperately try to regain attention demonstrate that they lack control over their own emotions. Those who remain steadfast, maintain their routines, and demonstrate that their lives do not revolve around a single relationship pass the emotional resilience test. It is important to understand that this alternation is not necessarily negative. In fact, it can be seen as an opportunity for the man to stand out, showing that he possesses self-confidence, balance, and self-worth, qualities that are subconsciously sought by women in a partner. Men who understand this logic begin to interpret distance not as rejection, but as a signal to maintain their own pace, reinforce their own life, and demonstrate emotional consistency. Furthermore, this dynamic creates a healthy emotional tension, which increases attraction. When well managed, the alternation between closeness and distance makes her perceive her value more intensely, reinforcing the connection without the need for explicit effort or exaggerated demonstrations. The secret lies in not reacting impulsively and not turning each separation into a crisis, but rather using these moments to strengthen your own autonomy and attractiveness. Another important aspect is that men who understand this silent strategy can decode subtle signals. A change in tone of voice, a purposeful delay in response, or small testing gestures. Each of these actions provides information about their real interest, their level of emotional security, and their willingness to invest in the relationship in a balanced way. Ultimately, understanding this alternation between distance and closeness allows you to develop strategic patience, increase your perceived value, and build a relationship based on respect, attraction, and true reciprocity. Men who internalize this dynamic become less susceptible to manipulation and more prepared for healthy and lasting relationships, recognizing the psychological game not as a threat, but as a silent language of emotional compatibility. As a relationship progresses, many men don't realize that, even in seemingly ordinary situations, she is constantly assessing their ability to lead and provide emotional security. It's not just about money or status, but about how you handle everyday problems, pressures, and conflicts. This assessment is silent, often unconscious, but decisive in how she sees your value as a partner. When challenges arise, whether minor disagreements or stressful external situations, she observes how you react under pressure. Men who despair, lose control, or delegate responsibilities emotionally show that they lack the necessary stability. Men who remain firm, make thoughtful decisions, and manage to convey calm demonstrate natural leadership, arousing deep attraction and trust. Another subtle test is the ability to take initiative without pressuring her. Women observe whether you can propose solutions, activities, or paths without turning it into control or imposition. Men who can lead with balance, respecting her space, reinforce their value, becoming desirable partners not only for what they offer, but for how they offer it. Emotional security also plays a central role. She wants to feel that you don't depend exclusively on her approval to be okay. Men who demonstrate self-confidence, who maintain hobbies, social circles, and their own purpose, pass the test. The idea is not to ignore her or be cold, but to show that you are complete in yourself and that the relationship is a complement, not a desperate need. Furthermore, this chapter of the psychological game reveals how she assesses your resilience in the face of small provocation tests, subtle comments, questioning of attitudes, or even jokes that challenge your patience. Men who can handle these moments with humor, emotional intelligence, and firmness, without losing their composure, demonstrate maturity. It is this maturity that often differentiates men who remain just friends from those who achieve a position as a reliable and attractive partner. The key point is understanding that these actions are not attacks, but rather instruments of silent evaluation. The woman wants to see if you can balance emotion and reason, firmness and sensitivity, presence and autonomy. Men who internalize this logic realize that each apparent test is, in fact, an opportunity to consistently demonstrate value, without games or conscious manipulation. In short, this chapter prepares the ground for the final stage of the roadmap, where we consolidate our understanding of the female psychological game, identifying the most subtle patterns and signals. The ability to interpret these nuances will be crucial to avoid frustration, strengthen genuine connections, and build solid relationships. By this point, you already understand that what a woman never says in words often speaks louder than any sentence. Silence, subtle attitudes, veiled tests, and even sudden retreats are all components of a sophisticated psychological game, designed to assess her emotional reaction, maturity, and stability. Men who perceive these signals and know how to react not only avoid emotional traps, but also strengthen their position within the relationship. A crucial point is understanding that she wants you to figure it out, not for her to explain it. This means that your attention to detail, observation of behavior, and interpretation of subtext are worth more than words spoken aloud. Small gestures, communication patterns, and even mood swings reveal a lot about what she expects, fears, or desires. Men who ignore these clues end up being unconsciously manipulated, while those who understand the silent language become partners who convey security and confidence. Another essential aspect is recognizing the balance between presence and space. Women observe whether you can be present without suffocating, offer support without taking control, and demonstrate interest without becoming predictable. Men who understand this balance convey something that goes far beyond physical attraction. They show that they can sustain a healthy and satisfying relationship based on mutual respect and emotional intelligence. In addition, this final chapter explores how to transform all this understanding into practical action. The key is not to play games, manipulate, or deceive your partner, but to consciously adjust your posture, communication, and attitudes, maintaining consistency and authenticity. Each gesture, each response to veiled tests, each moment of patience or firmness builds a pattern that she perceives and respects, even if silently. And here comes the most powerful part. Men who internalize these strategies gain control over their own emotional experience. They stop reacting impulsively, stop feeling trapped in games they don't understand, and begin to conduct the relationship with clarity and confidence. It's the difference between being dragged along by tests and becoming the partner who naturally inspires admiration, trust, and desire. To conclude, I want to leave you with a practical reflection. Observe your own relationships, identify the silent signals, and start acting consciously and intentionally. The ability to perceive and respond to the female psychological game is not something you are born with. It is learned and developed, and it can completely transform your love life. If you really want to master this game and avoid being discarded without warning, click the link now and discover the complete method to understand the signals she never verbalizes and become the man she truly desires. Don't waste time being just another one. Be the protagonist of your own love story.